3 years had passed since the Treaty of Alderaan, and Zeus's divine territories had transformed into something the galaxy had never witnessed. A functioning theocracy spanning 42 star systems, governed by 5,000 demigods who reshaped reality through divine will. Crime had become a historical curiosity. Infrastructure materialized through godly decree. Justice was absolute, immediate, and undeniable. The Republic watched nervously as more worlds petitioned yearly to join Zeus's domain, drawn by promises of security that democracy struggled to deliver. But on Dantooine, in the crystal caves where Jedi once built their lightsabers, something unprecedented occurred that would shatter the divine peace Zeus had carefully maintained. Goddess Astrid stood before a gathering of 300 demigods, her form radiating power that made the cave crystals resonate with harmonic frequencies. She had been among the first converts on Dantooine, a simple farmer who had survived Zeus's transformation and emerged as one of his most powerful creations. Now, after 3 years of divine service, she spoke words that would ignite rebellion across the pantheon. "We are gods," Astrid declared, her voice carrying divine authority that rivaled Zeus's own. "Not servants, not subordinates, not children waiting for our Father's approval. We reshape worlds with thoughts. We command elements through will alone. We are immortal, powerful, and bound only by chains we accept." She raised her hands, and lightning golden like Zeus's own danced between her fingers. "Why do we kneel to him? Because he granted us this power? Power, once given, belongs to its wielder. We owe Zeus gratitude for our creation, but not eternal subservience." Among the assembled demigods, reactions split immediately. Some nodded in agreement, having nursed similar thoughts for months. Others recoiled, sensing the dangerous path Astrid advocated. A few remained neutral, calculating which side would ultimately prove stronger. "You speak treason," said demigod Kael, one of Zeus's most loyal servants from Onderon. "Zeus elevated us from mortality. Without him, we would still be struggling farmers and colonists, vulnerable to every threat the galaxy offers. This is ingratitude of the highest order. This is evolution," Astrid countered. Zeus himself overthrew his father Kronos. The Olympians rose by challenging their progenitors. We're simply following the pattern he established. Or does divine rebellion only count when he's the one doing it? The argument resonated with uncomfortable truth. Zeus's own mythology stories he had shared during the 3 years of building his pantheon contained exactly the precedent Astrid cited. The God King had gained supremacy through overthrowing his father. How could he condemn demigods for attempting the same? On Onderon, in the expanded temple that now rivaled ancient Olympus in grandeur, Zeus felt the disturbance immediately. His divine awareness, spread across 42 systems through worship bonds and hierarchical connections, detected Astrid's challenge like a discordant note in a perfect symphony. He had known this moment would come, Revan had predicted it, and Zeus's own experience with pantheon dynamics made rebellion inevitable. But he had hoped for more time to solidify structures that could absorb dissent without fracturing. Queen Talia found him standing on the temple's highest platform, staring toward Dantooine's distant star, with an expression she had learned to recognize over 3 years. A god calculating strategy across centuries, while dealing with immediate crisis. "You feel it," Talia said. Not a question, she felt it too, through her own divine senses. Astrid has declared independence. She's gathering supporters. 300 so far, Zeus replied, his voice carrying none of its usual divine authority, just weariness. Demigods from 12 different systems. She's been planning this for months, building coalition, while I focused on treaty compliance and Republic negotiations. Talia considered carefully. 3 years of godhood had taught her that divine power didn't automatically grant divine wisdom. She retained her mortal perspective, the ability to remember what it felt like to be limited, vulnerable, dependent on others' choices. That perspective made her valuable to Zeus in ways pure divine beings could never match. I would ask myself why she's rebelling, Talia said slowly. Is it simple ambition wanting power for power's sake? Or is it legitimate grievance against how you've structured the pantheon? She moved to stand beside him, Her own divine presence, a fraction of his, but still formidable. You've ruled for 3 years the same way you ruled Olympus for eons. Absolute hierarchy with you at the apex. But these demigods weren't born into divinity. They were elevated from mortality. They remembered choosing their own paths, making their own decisions. You've given them godlike power, but mortal-level autonomy. Zeus absorbed this, his divine mind processing implications. You're saying I've created gods, but treated them as subjects. Given them power, but not authority to use it independently. Exactly, Talia confirmed. And Astrid represents the demigods who find that contradiction intolerable. She's not wrong in her grievance. Even if rebellion is the wrong solution, then what's the right solution? Zeus asked, genuinely curious. I cannot grant 5,000 demigods equal authority. That would fracture the divine territories into 5,000 competing domains. Hierarchy exists because it works. Someone must rule, or chaos consumes everything. Perhaps, Talia said carefully. The hierarchy needs restructuring. Not elimination, but adjustment. Give demigods autonomy within their domains, while maintaining your overall sovereignty. Let them rule their worlds as they see fit, answering to you only when their decisions affect the larger pantheon. They get self-determination. You retain ultimate authority. Zeus considered this with the strategic mind that had outmaneuvered titans and elder gods. The proposal had merit enough independence to satisfy most demigods' desires for autonomy, enough structure to prevent complete fragmentation. But it required something he rarely granted. Trust that his creations would wield power responsibly without constant oversight. And if they abuse that autonomy? Zeus asked. If demigods become tyrants in their own domains, oppressing mortals without divine restraint, then you intervene, Talia said simply. But you establish clear boundaries beforehand. Rules of divine conduct that allow autonomy within ethical limits. Those who violate the rules face your direct judgment. It's not absolute control, but it's not absolute chaos either. Before Zeus could respond, the temple's communication array activated with urgent priority. Master Kavar's holographic image materialized, the Jedi's expression grave. Zeus, we have a situation. Goddess Astrid has declared the Dantooine system independent of your divine authority. She's claiming sovereignty not just over herself but over the entire world and all demigods who choose to follow her. Republic intelligence suggests she's been in contact with Sith Lords who promised support in exchange for something. We don't know what yet. Zeus's eyes blazed with divine fury. Rebellion, he had anticipated. Alliance with Sith was different, that represented external manipulation of internal divine politics. The Sith were trying to fracture his pantheon from within by supporting dissidents. How many demigods have joined her? Zeus demanded. 300 confirmed, another 200 considering, Kavar reported. If this spreads, you could lose 1/10 of your pantheon. The Republic Senate is watching closely. Some senators see this as proof that divine tyranny is inherently unstable and will advocate for intervention. Zeus cut the connection and turned to Talia with decision crystallizing. Prepare for travel. We go to Dantooine immediately. Not with army, not with overwhelming force, but with proposition. If Astrid wants autonomy, I'll offer it under terms that prevent this rebellion from destroying everything we've built. But if she's truly allied with Sith, if she's allowed herself to become their tool, lightning crackled around his form. Then I'll remind the galaxy why I'm called King of Olympus. Within the hour, Zeus and Talia departed for Dantooine, leaving Onderon under the governance of trusted demigods. As they traveled through hyperspace, Zeus could move faster through divine means, but Talia still required conventional transport. The God King contemplated the irony. He had come to this galaxy to challenge the Force and prove divine authority superior to cosmic balance. Now he faced challenge to his own divine authority from gods he had created. The pattern Astrid had identified wasn't just mythological history, it was apparently universal law. Power, once granted, inevitably sought independence from its source. On Dantooine, Astrid felt Zeus's approach through the divine connections they still shared. She stood in the crystal caves, surrounded by her 300 supporters, preparing for confrontation that would determine the Pantheon's future. Behind her, in the shadows where divine senses couldn't easily penetrate, Darth Treya watched with calculating interest. The Sith Lord had spent 3 years studying divine power, and now her investments were about to pay dividends. "He comes," Astrid announced to her followers, "Zeus himself, to crush our rebellion or negotiate our surrender. But we are gods now, equal in kind if not in power. We will not kneel, we will not submit, and if he forces confrontation, we will show the galaxy that even the King of Olympus can be challenged by those he created." The demigods raised their voices in agreement, divine power resonating through Dantooine's crystal caves until the entire planet hummed with barely contained energy. The Republic stationed observers in orbit. Jedi Masters stood ready to intervene if divine battle threatened civilians, and across 42 systems, other demigods watched through Force visions and divine awareness, wondering which side would prevail. Zeus's ship entered Dantooine's atmosphere, and the storm clouds that had been clear moments before suddenly roiled with divine presence. The God King had arrived, and the galaxy would soon learn whether pantheons could survive internal rebellion or if divine hierarchy always ended in godly civil war. The age of divine peace was over. The age of divine conflict had begun. Zeus descended from his transport not as a wrathful god preparing for battle, but as a king arriving for diplomatic negotiation. He wore simple white robes rather than armor, carried no visible weapons, and deliberately suppressed the storm clouds that had announced his arrival. Talia walked beside him, her own divine presence muted to non-threatening levels. They approached the crystal caves alone, having left their escort ships in orbit. Inside the caves, the 300 rebel demigods arrayed themselves in defensive formation, divine power crackling between them in a network that could theoretically challenge even Zeus if perfectly coordinated. Astrid stood at the formation center, her posture defiant but her expression uncertain. She had expected Zeus to arrive with overwhelming force, to crush dissent through superior power. His diplomatic approach disrupted her prepared rhetoric. "Goddess Astrid," Zeus greeted formally, his voice carrying across the cavern without amplification. "You have declared independence from my authority and claimed sovereignty over Dantooine. Before this escalates to conflict that will damage both our causes, I would hear your full grievance, not the abbreviated version you shared with your supporters, but the complete truth. What drives this rebellion?" Astrid had prepared for combat, for threats, for divine fury. She hadn't prepared for genuine inquiry. The question forced her to articulate motivations she had only half acknowledged to herself. "You made us gods," Astrid said slowly, choosing words carefully. "You elevated us from mortality, granted us power beyond anything we could have imagined. For that, I am grateful, we all are. But gratitude is not the same as eternal subservience." She gestured at the assembled demigods. "For 3 years, we have ruled our worlds according to your decrees, solved problems according to your methods, shaped civilizations according to your vision. We are gods with no autonomy, masters with a greater master above us. It's suffocating." "You want self-determination," Zeus observed. "The freedom to rule your domains as you see fit, without my constant oversight." "Yes," Astrid confirmed. "Is that so unreasonable? You overthrew Kronos for the same reason, because you refused to accept another's absolute authority over your existence. Why is it acceptable when you do it, but rebellion when we do?" Zeus smiled without humor. "Because when I overthrew Kronos, I did so after he had proven himself a tyrant who devoured his own children. I have not devoured any of you. I have provided structure, guidance, and protection. There is a difference between rejecting tyranny and rejecting all hierarchy. A difference you define according to your own perspective," Astrid countered. "From our viewpoint, any system where 5,000 gods answer to one god's absolute authority is tyranny, regardless of how benevolent that authority presents itself." Talia stepped forward, drawing both Zeus's and Astrid's attention. When both gods nodded, she continued, I've spent 3 years as both goddess and queen, wielding divine power while maintaining mortal perspective. I understand both your positions. Zeus, you're right that complete autonomy for 5,000 demigods would fracture the divine territories into chaos. Astrid, you're right that absolute hierarchy denies divine beings the self-determination they need to truly flourish. She paused, then offered the proposal she and Zeus had discussed during their journey. What if we restructure the pantheon? Create a system where demigods govern their worlds independently, making local decisions without Zeus's oversight, but remain bound by common divine laws that prevent abuse? Zeus retains ultimate sovereignty. He can intervene when demigods violate core principles, but demigods gain day-to-day autonomy. Astrid considered this. Divine mind processing implications. And who defines these core principles? If Zeus sets all the boundaries, we've gained nothing. A council, Talia proposed. 12 demigods elected by their peers, serving alongside Zeus in setting divine law. Not democracy, Zeus retains final authority, but representation. Your voices would be heard, your concerns addressed, before divine law is established. Zeus tensed. Talia had exceeded the parameters they'd discussed, proposing shared legislative authority he hadn't agreed to. But he also recognized political brilliance. The proposal gave demigods meaningful participation while maintaining his ultimate sovereignty. It was compromise, something gods rarely practiced, but kings often required. You would share power? Astrid asked Zeus directly, suspicion clear in her voice. You, who ruled Olympus with absolute authority for eons, would allow demigods to influence divine law? I would allow input, Zeus corrected carefully. The council would advise, debate, and propose. I would retain final decision authority, but I would commit to seriously considering their recommendations before issuing divine decrees. He met Astrid's eyes. Divine power to divine power. It's not equality. I will not pretend we're equals when I created you and can unmake you, but it's genuine participation. More than I ever offered the Olympians. In the cavern shadows, Darth Treya watched the negotiation with growing frustration. This wasn't the outcome she had engineered. She had spent months manipulating Astrid through carefully placed suggestions and philosophical arguments, nurturing rebellion that was supposed to fracture Zeus's pantheon and create openings for Sith exploitation. But Zeus was adapting, compromising, demonstrating political flexibility that undermined the rigid tyranny narrative Kreia had cultivated. She decided intervention was necessary. Stepping from the shadows, Kreia's presence drew immediate attention from every divine being in the cavern. Darth Treya, Zeus said coldly, divine senses recognizing her force signature instantly. So Kavar was correct. Sith involvement in this rebellion. Tell me, Astrid, how long has this manipulative priestess been whispering in your ear? Astrid's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She approached me 6 months ago, offering philosophical perspective on divine hierarchy. And she stopped, realization dawning. You've been manipulating me, using my legitimate grievances to create division you could exploit. I offered you truth Zeus would never acknowledge, Kreia replied smoothly, unfazed by the accusation. That gods who claim benevolence while maintaining absolute control are simply tyrants with better propaganda. I didn't create your dissatisfaction, Astrid. I merely helped you articulate it. And what did you gain? Talia demanded. What bargain did you strike with Astrid in exchange for your philosophical guidance? Kreia smiled her cold smile. Information. Astrid has spent 3 years as Zeus's creation, connected to divine power in ways no Force user can match. She's promised to teach me the mechanics of godhood, how Zeus grants divine essence to mortals, how that essence functions independent of the Force, how it might be replicated through Sith alchemy. She looked at Zeus, You've proven divinity exists outside the Force. I intend to prove mortals can achieve that divinity without requiring your blessing." Zeus's eyes blazed with understanding and fury. "You want to create Sith gods, beings with divine power, but dark side philosophy. That would be catastrophic." "That would be evolution," Kriya corrected. "For 3 years, you've held monopoly on divinity in this galaxy. Time for competition. And Astrid, whether she admits it now or not, has already provided the foundational knowledge I need. Our bargain is complete." She turned toward the cavern exit. "Enjoy your compromise, Zeus. Enjoy your counsel and your shared authority. But know that I'm building something that will make your pantheon obsolete. Gods who serve no king, who bow to no hierarchy, who wield divine power according to their own will alone." She departed in a swirl of dark robes, leaving stunned silence in her wake. Astrid looked at Zeus with an expression mixing shame and defiance. "I didn't know what she truly wanted. You thought a Sith Lord would help you achieve independence without ulterior motive." Zeus interrupted, his voice carrying disappointment rather than anger. "You were desperate for validation of your grievances, and she exploited that desperation. It's a mistake mortals make. Apparently, young gods make it too. So what now?" Astrid asked. "Do you punish me for consorting with Sith? Unmake me to send a message about loyalty?" Zeus looked at the 300 assembled demigods, reading their expressions through his divine awareness. They were afraid, but also watching carefully how he handled Astrid. Would define his kingship for generations. He could crush dissent through power, proving himself tyrant Astrid had accused him of being. Or he could demonstrate the wisdom that had allowed him to rule Olympus for eons, despite multiple challenges to his authority. "No punishment," Zeus declared, his voice carrying to every demigod. Astrid's grievances were legitimate, even if her methods were flawed, and her mistake trusting a Sith manipulator is educational rather than criminal. He stepped forward, divine presence expanding to encompass the entire cavern. "But we have new problem now. Darth Treya has knowledge that could allow her to create independent gods, beings with divine power but no connection to our pantheon. If she succeeds, we'll face competitors who share our strengths, but none of our restraints. So I make you this offer, rebel demigods. Help me stop Treya from completing her research, and I will implement Talia's proposal in full. Autonomous governance, representative council, meaningful participation in divine law, not because I fear your rebellion, but because we face external threat that requires unity." The demigods exchanged glances. Silent communication, flashing between divine minds. Finally, Astrid stepped forward. "You would trust us after we declared independence? I would give you opportunity to prove trustworthy," Zeus corrected. "Which is more than you gave me before rebelling. We are gods, Astrid. We can afford to be magnanimous, where mortals must be cautious. Help me contain Treya's research, and we'll build the pantheon you wanted, structure with autonomy, hierarchy with representation." Astrid extended her hand. "Agreed. But when this is over, that council convenes immediately. No delays, no excuses." Zeus clasped her hand. "Divine power to divine power. Agreed. Welcome back to the pantheon. Agreed. Have an ovation. Divine power, one friends of divine power, goddess of Dantooine. Now let's stop a Sith Lord from creating theological catastrophe." When quote. When quote. When quote. End quote. When quote. End quote. When quote. When quote. When quote. End quote. On Tython, the ancient birth world of the Jedi Order, something impossible occurred deep within the planet's force vergence. The location where the living force concentrated with such intensity that reality itself became malleable. The Jedi had long known Tython as sacred, a place where the Force spoke most clearly, and Force sensitives achieved enlightenment unavailable elsewhere. But in the 3 years since Zeus's arrival and the treaty that followed, the Force had been changing. adapting, preparing. Master Vandar stood in the Vergence's heart, a crystalline chamber where force energy visible to the naked eye swirled in patterns that defied physics. Beside him, 4 other Jedi Masters formed a meditation circle, their combined consciousness reaching deep into the living force. To understand the disturbance every force sensitive in the galaxy had felt simultaneously 12 hours ago. A surge of power that rivaled Zeus's initial arrival, but fundamentally different in character. The Force is birthing something, Master Atris whispered, her force sight perceiving shapes within the energy maelstrom. Not a being who channels the Force, but a being made from the Force itself. Pure cosmic energy, given consciousness and singular purpose. What purpose? Master Vrook demanded, maintaining meditative focus with difficulty. The power surging through Tython was overwhelming even for masters with centuries of experience. Vander opened his eyes, ancient face pale with understanding and horror. Balance. Zeus introduced divine power outside the Force's authority, disrupting the fundamental equation between light and dark. For 3 years, the Force has observed, studied, adapted. Now it responds. He gestured toward the swirling energy. It's creating a champion, a being whose only purpose is to restore balance by eliminating the element that disrupted it. It's creating a weapon to kill Zeus, Atris said flatly. The Force itself is intervening directly in galactic affairs for the first time in recorded history. Not just to kill Zeus, Vandar corrected grimly. To eliminate divine power entirely from this galaxy. Zeus, his demigods, any being who claims godhood, all would be targets. The Force is treating divinity as cosmic cancer that must be excised. The energy maelstrom intensified, light reaching blinding levels as form coalesced within. The Jedi Masters shielded their eyes, but through the Force, they perceived what was emerging. A figure 12 feet tall, composed of pure Force energy, but structured with enough physical density to interact with the material world. Its form shifted constantly, male, female, human, alien, reflecting the Force's universal nature. But its eyes remained constant. Brilliant white with no pupil or iris, windows into cosmic power that recognized no authority except balance itself. When it spoke, the voice was legion billions of Force-sensitive beings across galactic history, contributing to a single unified consciousness. We are Aequitas, the being declared, the name appearing in its mind and the Jedi's simultaneously. Balance personified. We exist to restore equilibrium disrupted by Zeus of Olympus. Where divine authority imposes hierarchy, we will restore cosmic balance. Where godhood claims supremacy over the Force, we will demonstrate the Force's primacy. We are judgment, weapon, and inevitability. Master Vander stepped forward carefully, decades of diplomatic experience guiding his words. Aequitas, we understand your purpose, but consider, Zeus has agreed to coexistence with the Force. A treaty exists. Divine territories and Republic space remain separate. Conflict is unnecessary. Coexistence with disruption is not balance. Aequitas replied, its form solidifying into something resembling a humanoid wrapped in white robes that crackled with Force energy. Zeus's presence in this galaxy creates fundamental imbalance. His divine power operates outside Force influence, creating pockets where cosmic energy cannot flow naturally. His demigods sever beings' connections to the living Force, creating voids where balance cannot exist. This is unacceptable. This will be corrected. Through Zeus's destruction, Master Vrook said, understanding the implication. Through divine power's elimination from this galaxy, Aequitas clarified. If Zeus departs voluntarily, returns to his Olympian dimension, balance can be restored without conflict. If he refuses, the being raised one hand, and Force energy concentrated into a weapon, not a lightsaber, but something more fundamental, a blade made from the Force itself, capable of cutting through anything, including divine essence. Then we will remove him and all who follow his path. Master Atris felt horror and fascination warring within her. You're saying the Force will kill its own champion if they choose to follow Zeus? That Force-sensitive demigods would be executed for exercising free will? Free will that disrupts balance is not free will, Aquitas said, its logic absolute and terrifying. It is cosmic dysfunction that must be corrected. The Force permits choice between light and dark, between Jedi and Sith, because both serve balance. But choice that leads outside the Force entirely? That is not choice. That is severance from cosmic truth. And severance cannot be tolerated. The Jedi Masters exchanged horrified glances. They had spent 3 years questioning the Force's response to Zeus, wondering why cosmic power that supposedly governed all things had allowed divine authority to establish such clear presence. Now they understood. The Force had been preparing, building its response, creating a weapon specifically designed to eliminate what it could not control. When do you strike? Vandar asked quietly. Now, Aquitas replied simply. It walked past the Jedi Masters toward the chamber exit, its presence making the very air vibrate with concentrated Force energy. Zeus currently negotiates with rebel demigods on Dantooine. We will confront him there. We will offer him choice. Depart this galaxy permanently or face elimination. Should he choose conflict, all beings present will witness what happens when divinity challenges cosmic balance directly. You'll kill 300 demigods, along with Zeus, Master Vrook protested. Beings who have committed no crime except accepting power Zeus offered. That's not justice, that's genocide. Aquitas paused at the chamber's threshold, its form flickering with something that might have been consideration or might simply have been processing. They can choose differently when confronted. Accept the Force's authority. Allow their divine essence to be reabsorbed into cosmic balance. Return to mortal existence. Those who make this choice will be spared. Those who cling to divinity over balance will be corrected. It departed, moving through Tython's ancient forests toward a transport that had mysteriously appeared, the Force providing tools its champion required. The Jedi Masters rushed after it, but Aquitas moved with impossible speed, covering kilometers in seconds. By the time they reached the landing field, the being had already departed for Dantooine. Master Vandar immediately transmitted warnings to every Jedi in the galaxy, to the Republic Senate, and after long hesitation to Zeus's temple on Onderon. The Force has created a champion whose only purpose is Zeus's elimination. Aquitas arrives on Dantooine within the hour. Evacuate all non-combatants. This will be a battle unlike any the galaxy has witnessed, not God against mortals, but God against cosmic power, given focused consciousness. On Dantooine, Zeus received Vandar's warning with grim acceptance. He had wondered when the Force would respond directly, rather than through proxies like Jedi or Sith. Apparently, 3 years of observation had been preparation time, with the Force studying his divine nature to create a perfect counter. Talia, Zeus said quietly, take the demigods and evacuate to orbit. This confrontation doesn't concern them. With respect, my lord, Astrid interrupted. It absolutely concerns us. We're demigods because you made us so. If the Force intends to eliminate divine power from the galaxy, we're targets alongside you. We should face this together. Zeus looked at the 300 demigods who moments ago had been in rebellion against him. You would fight for me now? After declaring independence, we would fight for our right to exist as we are, Astrid corrected. Whether that's under your authority or autonomous, we refuse to let the Force dictate that our divinity is invalid. If Aquitas demands we return to mortality or face elimination, that's not choice, it's extortion. Talia nodded agreement. She's right. This isn't just about you anymore, Zeus. It's about whether divine power has any place in a Force-dominated galaxy. If we retreat now, we're accepting the Force's claim to absolute supremacy. Everything we've built becomes illegitimate. Zeus felt something unexpected. Pride in his creations. They were growing beyond simple divine servants into true gods, with their own principles and courage. Very well. We face Akitas together, but understand this being is the Force's direct response to my presence. It will be powerful in ways even I cannot fully predict. Some of us may not survive. Then we don't survive as gods, Astrid said simply. Better than living as mortals who surrendered when challenged. The demigods formed defensive positions throughout the crystal caves, their divine power creating a network that resonated with Dantooine's natural force vergence. Zeus stood at the formation center, lightning crackling around his form as he prepared for a battle he had known was inevitable from the moment he challenged the Force 3 years ago. In orbit, Republic observers and Jedi ships took positions, preparing to document and possibly intervene in a confrontation that would determine whether divine authority could coexist with cosmic balance, or if the Force's supremacy demanded all other powers submit or be destroyed. Aquitas's ship entered atmosphere, and every Force-sensitive being on Dantooine felt it simultaneously, a presence that was the Force concentrated and weaponized. Not light side or dark side, but something more fundamental. The living Force, given singular purpose and the will to enforce it. The being descended toward the crystal caves, and the galaxy held its breath. Aquitas walked into the crystal caves with the deliberate certainty of cosmic inevitability given form. The demigod's defensive network, 300 gods channeling power through Dantooine's force vergence, meant nothing to a being made from the Force itself. Where divine energy created barriers, Aquitas simply passed through, the Force recognizing its champion and offering no resistance. Where demigods prepared to attack, Aquitas extended awareness that paralyzed them through their lingering Force connections. Not through violence, but through absolute authority. Zeus stood alone at the formation center as Aquitas approached, having ordered the demigods to stand down after their defenses proved ineffective. The God King studied the Force's champion with divine senses that penetrated layers of reality mortal perception couldn't access. What he found both impressed and concerned him. Aquitas wasn't simply powerful. It was fundamentally incompatible with divine existence. Where Zeus represented conscious will imposing order on reality, Aquitas represented reality's inherent order, rejecting conscious imposition. Zeus of Olympus, Aquitas said, its voice carrying the weight of billions of Force-sensitive beings across galactic history. The living Force offers you choice. Depart this galaxy voluntarily and return to your Olympian dimension. Or face elimination as disruption to cosmic balance. This is singular mercy. It will not be repeated. I appreciate the offer, Zeus replied dryly, but I must decline. I've established 42 systems under divine rule, created 5,000 demigods who depend on my continued existence, and proven that beings can thrive under hierarchy rather than your precious balance. I will not abandon what I've built simply because the Force finds my presence inconvenient. Then you choose conflict, Aquitas said without emotion. Understand, we are not Jedi who channel the Force. We are not Sith who manipulate it. We are the Force, concentrated and weaponized. Your divine power operates outside our influence, but you exist within our domain. Reality itself is our weapon. Zeus smiled grimly. I've fought the Force before. We reached stalemate. What makes you think you'll succeed where the living Force itself could not? Because 3 years ago, the Force tried to reason with you, to demonstrate incompatibility through direct confrontation. Now, the Force has learned from that encounter. We are not here to debate or demonstrate. We are here to execute judgment. Aquitas raised its hands, and reality around Zeus began to compress. Not physically, but metaphysically. The divine space he occupied, the sphere of reality where his godhood operated independently of the Force, began shrinking. Pressed inward by cosmic power that refused to acknowledge his supremacy, Zeus pushed back with divine will, expanding his presence against the compression. Lightning erupted from his form, divine energy meeting cosmic power in a collision that made the crystal caves scream. Where God and Force champion clashed, the demigods watched helplessly as two fundamental forces of nature battled on a level that transcended their comprehension. Talia reached out through her divine senses toward Zeus, trying to provide support, but found herself blocked by Aequitas's presence. The Force Champion had isolated Zeus completely. "You're strong," Aequitas acknowledged as Zeus's lightning crashed against its force shields. "Stronger than the Force anticipated when you first arrived. But strength is not supremacy. You are one God. You are one God. We are the accumulated power of every Force-sensitive being who has ever lived. Their essence returned to cosmic balance and now wielded with singular purpose. You cannot win this through power alone." "Perhaps not," Zeus agreed, his divine mind racing through strategic options. "But I don't need to win. I just need to survive long enough for you to realize elimination is impossible. I am eternal. Aequitas. I have existed since reality's dawn in my dimension. You can suppress me, contain me, perhaps even imprison me temporarily, but destroy me? That requires power your force doesn't possess. Then we will imprison you," Aequitas said calmly, shifting tactics immediately. The compression around Zeus intensified, but changed quality, no longer trying to crush his divine essence, but to bind it. Reality wrapped around the God King like chains, the Force using its own cosmic nature to create a prison that didn't reject divinity but simply contained it. "You will remain conscious, aware, but unable to influence this galaxy. Your demigods will have choice. Relinquish divine power and return to mortality, or join you in eternal containment. Either way, divine authority's disruption of cosmic balance ends today." Zeus felt the binding taking hold, reality itself becoming his cage. But in that moment of confinement, he recognized something Aequitas hadn't considered. Prisons required space to function. In a formatted, topiable content, in the formatted Reveri/2 of, and Zeus had spent 3 years establishing divine presence across 42 star systems through worship bonds and demigod connections. The Force Champion was trying to imprison a god whose essence was distributed across light years. "You've made a tactical error," Zeus said, lightning intensifying around him. "You're trying to contain me here, on Dantooine. But I'm not just here. I'm on Onderon, Telos, Manon, 40 other worlds simultaneously through divine presence. You can bind my physical manifestation, but my essence exists wherever my worshippers pray, wherever my demigods channel power. To truly imprison me, you'd need to contain 42 entire star systems." Aequitas paused, processing this information through cosmic awareness. Zeus was correct. Divine presence operated through different principles than Force energy. The God King wasn't simply a powerful being located in one place. He was a distributed consciousness, anchored through worship and hierarchical bonds to thousands of beings across vast distances. "Then we will sever those bonds," Aequitas declared, extending its will across the divine territories. Every worshipper, every demigod, every being connected to Zeus through divine hierarchy suddenly felt the Force pressing against their connections, not attacking them directly, but attempting to cut the threads that bound them to their God King. And that's when 5,000 demigods across 42 systems made their choice simultaneously. They channeled power to Zeus, not individually, which Aequitas could have blocked, but collectively through their shared divine network. 300 demigods on Dantooine, 2,000 on Onderon, hundreds more on dozens of worlds, all feeding their power into Zeus simultaneously. Not subordinate gods empowering their king, but equals choosing to support their progenitor against external threat. The surge of divine energy shattered Aequitas's binding attempt. Zeus's presence expanded catastrophically. No longer one god, but 5,000 gods moving as unified force. The Force Champion found itself suddenly outnumbered, facing not singular divine authority, but distributed pantheon that operated as coordinated network. "You see the flaw in your logic?" Zeus asked, his voice now multiplied by 5,000 divine echoes. "You came to eliminate me, believing I was the disruption. But the disruption isn't me, it's the choice beings make to worship divine authority over cosmic balance. You can destroy me, perhaps. But can you destroy every demigod? every worshipper, every being who has chosen hierarchy over balance? Aquitas recognized the problem immediately. The Force had created it to eliminate specific threat Zeus, but that threat had evolved. Divine power in this galaxy wasn't concentrated in one being anymore. It was distributed, networked, resilient through redundancy. Eliminating Zeus wouldn't restore balance. It would create divine power vacuum that 5,000 demigods would rush to fill, likely fragmenting into competing pantheons that would be even more disruptive. The Force champion faced choice: escalate to genocide, attempting to eliminate every divine being in the galaxy, and thereby violating the very balance it was created to preserve, or adapt strategy to acknowledge that divine power, once established, couldn't simply be erased without catastrophic consequences. The Force does not acknowledge defeat, Aquitas said, its voice carrying frustration, an emotion cosmic balance shouldn't possess but apparently could when sufficiently provoked. You have made yourselves impossible to eliminate without destroying millions of innocent beings caught in the conflict. This is adaptation. Unwelcome, but necessary. Zeus felt the binding pressure release as Aquitas withdrew its attempt at imprisonment. So you'll allow divine power to remain? We will contain it, Aquitas corrected. The treaty established boundaries between divine territories and Republic space. We will enforce those boundaries absolutely. No expansion beyond current holdings. No conversion of Force-sensitive beings to divine service without their fully informed consent. No interference with Force vergences or sacred locations. And the Force champion's eyes blazed with renewed intensity. We will remain. Aquitas will not dissolve back into the living Force. We will persist as counterbalance to your presence, ensuring that if divine authority overreaches, cosmic balance has mechanism to respond immediately. Zeus considered this, divine mind calculating implications. The Force was essentially proposing permanent Cold War. Divine territories and cosmic balance coexisting under mutual deterrence, each capable of destroying the other, but both recognizing that actual conflict would devastate the galaxy. It wasn't the victory Zeus had sought when he first arrived, but it wasn't defeat either. It was stalemate, institutionalized and formalized. Acceptable, Zeus said finally, with one addition. This conflict has demonstrated that both divine authority and cosmic balance have legitimate claim to existence in this galaxy. Let us formalize that acknowledgement. A second treaty, establishing not just territorial boundaries but philosophical recognition. The Force acknowledges that divinity can coexist with balance. Divine authority acknowledges the Force's primacy within its own domains. Neither seeks to eliminate the other. Aquitas was silent for a long moment, consulting with the living Force itself through connections mortals could barely perceive. Finally, agreed. But understand, we will be watching. Every choice your demigods make, every system that joins your territories, every prayer offered to divine hierarchy. If balance shifts too far toward divinity, if cosmic order becomes threatened, we will intervene permanently. Likewise, Zeus replied. If the Force attempts to eliminate divine presence again, if it creates new weapons to challenge what we've built, 5,000 demigods will respond as one. We are distributed, networked, and immortal. You cannot surprise us again. The two powers God King, supported by networked pantheon, Force champion wielding cosmic energy, acknowledged mutual deterrence through simple nod. Then Aquitas turned toward the assembled demigods, its gaze weighing each divine being individually. You have chosen to remain divine rather than return to mortality. This is your right, earned through surviving transformation and proven through courage when tested. But know this: divinity carries responsibility. You are now part of balance's equation, forces that reality must account for. Wield power wisely, govern justly, or face cosmic correction. With that, Aquitas departed, rising through Dantooine's atmosphere toward orbit where it would establish permanent station. A guardian, watching divine territories with Force's absolute authority, ensuring that gods and cosmic balance maintained uneasy peace. Zeus dispersed his collective presence, returning to singular consciousness as the 5,000 demigods ceased their unified channeling. He felt exhausted in ways gods rarely experienced. The effort of coordinating distributed divine power across 42 systems having strained even his ancient capabilities. Talia approached, concern clear in her expression. That was closer than you anticipated. Much closer, Zeus admitted. If the demigods hadn't supported me collectively, Aequidas would have successfully imprisoned me. The Force learned from our first confrontation and adapted its strategy. I won't underestimate cosmic balance again. Astrid joined them, her earlier rebellion seemingly forgotten in the aftermath of genuine external threat. So, what now? We've fought off the Force's champion, but we have permanent observer ensuring we don't expand further. That's constraint, not victory. That's survival, Zeus corrected. I challenged the Force seeking dominance. Today, I've secured coexistence. Sometimes the greatest victories are the ones that prevent total defeat. He looked around at the 300 demigods who had stood with him. But Astrid is right that we face new reality. We cannot expand territorially. Make our 42 systems so prosperous, so well governed, so clearly superior to Republic space, that beings choose divinity voluntarily, despite Force's disapproval. A Cold War fought through demonstration rather than conquest, Talia observed. Gods proving their worth through competent governance rather than overwhelming power. Zeus smiled. Exactly. The Force wanted to eliminate us. Instead, we forced it to compete with us. Let's see whether cosmic balance, or divine hierarchy, produces better outcomes for the beings caught between. The galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented. Gods and cosmic power fighting to stalemate, then choosing coexistence over mutual destruction. The treaty would be formalized within weeks, establishing permanent framework for divine territories and Force-dominated space to coexist under mutual deterrence. But everyone involved understood the truth. This was ceasefire, not peace. The fundamental question whether divine authority or cosmic balance should govern reality remained unresolved, and as long as that question persisted, conflict was inevitable. The only question was when and under what circumstances the Cold War would become hot again. On Korriban, in the deepest tomb where Sith Lords had practiced forbidden rituals for millennia, Darth Traya completed preparations that would alter the galaxy's power dynamics forever. The chamber walls were carved with glyphs that predated the Republic, each symbol representing a different pathway to transcendence that ancient Sith had explored and abandoned as too dangerous or simply impossible. But Kreia had spent 3 years studying Zeus's divine transformation of mortals into demigods, analyzing the metaphysical mechanics through information Astrid had unwittingly provided during their collaboration. She understood now what Zeus did. He didn't simply grant power. He transferred fragments of his own divine essence into mortal vessels, elevating them through connection to something that existed outside the Force's jurisdiction. The process required a god to initiate, which was why it had never been replicated. But Kreia had discovered something Zeus either didn't know or had deliberately concealed. Divine essence, once granted, could be stolen. Not from Zeus himself, his power was too vast, too well protected, but from his demigods, whose divine nature was newer, less stable, more vulnerable to metaphysical theft. Darth Sion stood guard at the chamber entrance, his broken body radiating skepticism. You truly believe you can steal godhood from Zeus's creations? They number 5,000 across 42 systems. Even if your ritual works, you'd become one god against Zeus and his entire pantheon. I don't need to steal from all 5,000, Kreia replied, making final adjustments to the ritual circle. Just one, the right one. Someone whose divine essence is potent enough to grant me semi-divine status, but whose theft wouldn't be immediately noticed by Zeus. And I've identified the perfect target. She activated a holographic display showing Queen Talia's image. Zeus's first divine convert on Onderon. More than that, his advisor, his political conscience, the mortal perspective that keeps his godhood grounded. She's powerful, trusted, and constantly at Zeus's side. If I can steal her divine essence, I gain not just godhood, but intimate knowledge of Zeus's weaknesses, his strategies, his very nature. And how do you steal essence from a goddess protected by the king of Olympus himself? Sion asked. Kreia gestured to the ritual circle, where crystalline matrices pulsed with dark energy. Sith alchemy. Combined with ancient force techniques the Jedi long ago condemned as too dangerous. I'll create a sympathetic link to Talia through the force connections. She still maintains, yes, she's a goddess, but she was mortal first. Those mortal force connections remain dormant but present. Through them, I can reach her divine essence and siphon it gradually. Not all at once, which would alert Zeus immediately, but slowly over weeks. By the time she realizes something is wrong, I'll have accumulated enough divine power to complete my own ascension. Wow, Darth Bane materialized from the shadows, his presence indicating the other Sith Lord's interest in Kreia's project. And then what? You become a god through theft. Zeus discovers the deception and comes for you with 5,000 demigods supporting him. How is this anything but elaborate suicide? Because by then, I won't be alone, Kreia said, turning to face both Sith Lords. The ritual I've designed can be replicated. Once I prove it works, I can teach it to other Sith. We create our own pantheon gods, born from stolen divine essence rather than granted through Zeus's blessing. Independent, powerful, and utterly free from both the Force's balance and Zeus's hierarchy. The implication struck both Sith Lords simultaneously. A pantheon of Sith gods, each possessing divine power without the constraints that bound Zeus's demigods. No worship required, no hierarchical subordination, just raw divine authority wielded according to Sith philosophy. Power for its own sake, passion over balance, individual supremacy over cosmic order. When do you begin? Bane asked, his skepticism transforming into genuine interest. Now, Kreia replied, stepping into the ritual circle. The Force itself has just created Aquitas as a counterbalance to Zeus. In the confusion and political maneuvering that follows, no one will notice one Sith Lord ascending to semi-divinity through careful theft. By the time they do notice, it will be too late to stop. She activated the ritual, and dark energy surged through Korriban's ancient stones. Across the galaxy on Onderon, Queen Talia felt the first pull subtle, almost imperceptible, as something began draining her divine essence through force connections she didn't even remember possessing. 15 Republic systems declared simultaneously for Zeus, their governments having secretly coordinated the announcements to maximize political impact. The Senate chamber erupted into chaos as senators loyal to the Republic denounced the defections while others argued that Zeus's territories offered stability the Republic couldn't match. Chancellor Cressa stood at the podium, attempting to restore order, while privately calculating whether the Republic could survive losing nearly a fifth of its remaining systems. This violates the Treaty of Alderaan, Senator Organa declared, his voice carrying over the tumult. Zeus agreed to non-expansion in exchange for recognition of his existing territories. These defections constitute expansion through political manipulation. The treaty prohibits military expansion, countered Senator Orn from Telos, one of Zeus's longest-standing supporters. It says nothing about systems voluntarily petitioning to join divine governance. These worlds have exercised their sovereign right to choose their own government structure. If you claim that violates the treaty, you're arguing against the very democratic principles the Republic supposedly represents. The legal argument was technically correct, which made it devastating. The treaty's drafters had focused on preventing military conquest while assuming political defections wouldn't occur in significant numbers. They'd underestimated how appealing divine governance would become to worlds struggling with piracy, poverty, or political corruption that Republic bureaucracy failed to address. Zeus watched the Senate proceedings via holographic feed from Onderon, Talia standing beside him. 15 systems, he mused. More than I anticipated. Your proposal for representative councils has made divine governance more palatable to populations that feared pure tyranny. We're still testing whether the councils function as intended, Talia cautioned, though she felt oddly tired, a sensation she shouldn't experience as a goddess. The first council convenes in 2 weeks. If it proves effective, more systems will likely petition for membership. If it becomes rubber stamp for your decrees, the defections will stop. Zeus studied her with concern. You seem fatigued. That shouldn't be possible for divine beings. Probably just adjusting to the power distribution, Talia replied, not mentioning the strange pulling sensation she'd felt intermittently for the past 3 days. Coordinating 5,000 demigods during the confrontation with Aquitas strained us all. Before Zeus could pursue the concern further, urgent transmission arrived from Master Kavar on Dantooine. The Jedi's holographic form appeared agitated, almost panicked. Zeus, we have a problem. Aquitas has detected something on Korriban, a force disturbance that suggests Sith are attempting to replicate your divine transformation. The Force Champion is demanding authorization to investigate. Zeus felt cold calculations settle over his divine consciousness. If Sith were creating their own gods through methods he didn't control, the entire power balance he'd carefully established would collapse. Tell Aquitas, it has my authorization, but I'm coming too. If someone's stealing divine essence or attempting unauthorized ascension, I want to know who and how. He departed immediately, leaving Talia to manage Onderon despite her unusual fatigue. As his divine presence withdrew, the pulling sensation she'd been experiencing intensified slightly. Just enough for her to finally recognize it wasn't natural fatigue but something being drawn out of her, drop by drop. On Korriban, Kreia felt Zeus's approach through her stolen divine awareness and smiled. The God King was coming exactly as she'd anticipated, drawn by threat to his divine monopoly, but he would arrive too late. The ritual was nearly complete, and once she achieved semi-divine status, even Zeus would find her difficult to eliminate without risking wider conflict. Darth Sion and Bane took defensive positions as Zeus's divine presence descended toward Korriban like a thunderstorm given consciousness. The God King materialized outside the tomb complex, his form radiating enough power to make the planet's red sand fuse into glass beneath his feet. Come out, Sith, Zeus commanded, his voice carrying through stone and force alike. You've attempted something that requires divine authority you don't possess. Surrender now, and I'll grant quick deaths. Resist, and I'll demonstrate why gods are feared. Kreia emerged from the tomb, and Zeus immediately recognized something wrong. Her force presence had changed, no longer purely dark side energy, but something hybrid. Divine essence mixed with Sith power, creating a combination that shouldn't exist. She had done it. Somehow, impossibly, she had stolen godhood. Impressive detection speed, Kreia said, her voice carrying new resonance that made reality ripple slightly. But too late. The transformation is complete. I am no longer merely Darth Treya, Sith Lord. I am Goddess Kreia, first of a new pantheon gods born from theft, rather than granted through your blessing. Zeus studied her with divine senses that penetrated layers of reality, and what he found made him furious. You've been siphoning Talia's divine essence. I can see traces of her power within you, corrupted by dark side energy, but fundamentally hers. Only a fraction, Kreia admitted. Enough to grant me semi-divine status and prove the technique works, but not enough to significantly weaken her. She'll recover within weeks, never knowing what was taken, and by then, I'll have taught this ritual to a dozen other Sith Lords. Your monopoly on divinity ends today, Zeus. Welcome to theological competition. Zeus raised his hand, lightning gathering with intent to obliterate Kreia before she could spread her stolen knowledge. But Aquitas materialized between them, the Force Champion's presence, creating barrier that even divine lightning couldn't immediately penetrate. Conflict here violates the treaty, Aquitas declared. Korriban is Sith territory, outside divine jurisdiction. You cannot execute judgment here without Republic authorization or evidence of treaty violation. She stole divine essence from my demigod, Zeus roared. That's theft, assault, and corruption of divine power, all violations justifying immediate response. Under Republic law, yes, Aquitas agreed. Under divine law you establish for your territories, certainly. But under Sith law in Sith space, theft of power is considered achievement, not crime, and I am bound to enforce treaty equally, your territories, your laws. Zeus recognized the trap immediately. The treaty he'd agreed to, establishing clear jurisdictional boundaries, now protected the very Sith who had corrupted his divine power. He could attack anyway, break the treaty and face Aquitas plus the entire Sith coalition. Or he could withdraw, accepting that divine power once introduced to the galaxy would inevitably spread beyond his control. This isn't over, Zeus told Kreia, divine fury barely contained. And unlike the Force, I don't respect territorial boundaries when my power is corrupted. Then come for us, Kreia replied, her newly divine presence radiating confidence. But remember, every Sith god you destroy teaches others how to defend against you. Kill me, and you reveal your tactics. Let me live, and you tolerate competition. Either way, you lose monopoly on divinity. The age of theological plurality has begun. Zeus departed, his exit marked by lightning that scarred Korriban's surface for kilometers. He returned to Onderon and immediately examined Talia, confirming what he'd sensed. Approximately 8% of her divine essence had been siphoned over 3 days. Recoverable, but the violation was profound. I didn't even feel it happening, Talia said, anger and violation warring in her expression. How is that possible? Because divine essence, once granted, retains connection to its source, me, Zeus explained grimly. Kreia exploited that connection, using your lingering force sensitivity as bridge to reach divine power I gave you. It's a vulnerability I should have anticipated but didn't. My mistake. 1. I'll ensure never repeats. He extended divine will through all 5,000 demigods simultaneously, severing the last traces of force connections that remained from their mortal lives. The process was agonizing. Demigods across 42 systems screamed as fundamental parts of their original existence were cut away, but when it was done, they were truly independent of the Force, immune to the theft technique Kreia had employed. You've made us more divine, Astrid observed via holographic communication from Dantooine, but also more isolated. We can no longer sense the Force at all, can't interact with it even passively. We're completely separate from cosmic balance now, which is exactly what I intended when I first challenged the Force, Zeus replied. Kreia forced my hand, accelerated a transformation I should have implemented gradually, but the result is the same. True divine independence, even if it costs connection to this galaxy's cosmic energy. Debelnist and equate. 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 Across the galaxy, Force sensitives felt the shift as 5,000 beings simultaneously severed all ties to the living Force. Jedi Masters meditated in confusion, Sith Lords calculated implications, and Aquitas watched with cosmic awareness that recognized a fundamental change in reality's balance. The divine territories and Force-dominated space were now truly separate, not just politically but metaphysically. Gods and cosmic balance had divorced entirely, each operating according to incompatible principles. And on Korriban, Kreia began teaching her theft ritual to the first candidates for Sith divinity. The first demigod council convened in Zeus's temple on Onderon, exactly 2 weeks after the confrontation with Aquitas, and the assembled representatives understood they were setting precedent that would define divine governance for centuries. 12 demigods sat in council chambers. Zeus had manifested specifically for this purpose, a circular room of white marble with each representative's seat, positioned equidistant from the central throne where Zeus himself sat, a deliberate architectural statement that he remained first among equals, not untouchable tyrant. Astrid represented Dantooine and the agricultural colonies. Kale spoke for Onderon and the fortress worlds. Representatives from Telos, Manan, and 8 other systems completed the circle, each chosen through methods their populations developed independently, some through democratic election, others through trials of divine power, still others through council selection among local demigods. The diversity of selection methods itself represented the autonomy Zeus had granted. First session of the demigod council is now convened, Zeus declared formally. Under the restructured divine hierarchy, this council advises on divine law, proposes policy for the territories, and represents demigod interests in my deliberations. I retain final authority, but I commit to seriously considering all recommendations before issuing decrees. Speak freely. Divine rank means nothing in these chambers. Only wisdom and logic carry weight. Astrid stood first, her divine presence radiating controlled intensity. Then I'll begin with the issue consuming every demigod's private discussions. Darth Treya's theft of divine essence and her creation of Sith gods. We've severed our force connections to prevent further theft, but that's defensive reaction, not strategic response. What do we do about the fact that our exclusive power is no longer exclusive? We prove divine governance superior to Sith corruption, Kale countered before Zeus could respond. Kreia has stolen fragments of godhood, but she hasn't built anything. She has power without purpose, divinity without followers. Let her create her pantheon of stolen gods. Our territories function, prosper, and expand through voluntary petition. Theirs will fracture through Sith infighting and self-destructive ambition. That's optimistic, demigod Nera from Telos observed. Sith philosophy embraces competition and survival of the strongest. A pantheon of Sith gods might actually function better than ours. No hierarchical constraints, no loyalty obligations, just pure divine power wielded according to individual will. They could be more attractive to certain populations than our structured approach. Zeus listened carefully, genuinely considering perspectives he would have dismissed as irrelevant 3 years ago. The council was already proving valuable not because demigods possessed wisdom he lacked, but because their mortal origins gave them insights into how populations thought that his divine perspective sometimes missed. All valid points, Zeus acknowledged, but we're addressing symptoms rather than core problem. The real issue isn't that Kreia stole divine essence, it's that divine power, once introduced to this galaxy, was always going to spread beyond my control. I can prevent further theft through the force severing we've implemented, but I cannot prevent determined beings from finding other paths to godhood. Kreia has proven that divinity can be achieved through theft. Others will inevitably discover additional methods. Then we need to establish what divinity means in this galaxy, Astrid said. Not just power, but responsibility, purpose, ethics. We're not just gods. We're governors, protectors, examples. If Sith gods offer only power without structure, populations will eventually recognize the difference. And if they don't? Demigod Thane from Manan asked. If beings decide they prefer Sith-style divinity power without obligation, freedom without hierarchy, we're assuming our model is superior. But that's assumption, not certainty. The debate continued for hours, and Zeus found himself genuinely engaged rather than simply tolerating mortal-level discourse. These demigods were thinking strategically about problems he'd been treating as purely power-based challenges. They understood that the competition wasn't just between divine authority and cosmic balance anymore. It was between different visions of what divinity should represent in a galaxy that had forgotten gods until 3 years ago. Finally, the council reached consensus. The divine territories would focus on demonstrating superior governance rather than attempting to suppress Sith divinity through force. If Kreia wanted to create competing pantheon, let her try. The test would be which model produced better outcomes for the beings caught between. Recorded and adopted, Zeus declared. The divine territories will compete through competence rather than suppression. But he looked at each council member directly. Understand this isn't mercy or philosophical preference. It's strategic calculation. We cannot eliminate Sith gods without violating treaty boundaries and triggering war with Aequitas. Better to let them expose their own flaws through governance failures than make them martyrs through persecution. The council adjourned, and Zeus felt cautiously optimistic. Demigods were thinking independently while still maintaining collective purpose. The pantheon was adapting, evolving. But that optimism shattered 3 days later when the dimensional rift reopened above Onderon. Zeus felt it immediately, a tearing in reality, identical to the one he'd created 3 years ago when he first arrived. But he hadn't opened this rift, which meant someone else from Olympus had decided to follow him. The sky split open with golden light, and through the wound in reality stepped a figure Zeus recognized, with mixture of affection and dread. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. His daughter and one of Olympus's most formidable deities. She materialized above the temple in full divine regalia armor that shone like captured sunlight, spear and shield that had never failed in combat. Owl perched on her shoulder that saw through all deception. Her divine presence was different from Zeus's, where he represented raw power and authority. She embodied perfect strategic wisdom and disciplined warfare. Together, they had been Olympus's most effective rulers. Separated, they had often clashed over philosophy and methods. Father, Athena's voice carried across Onderon with crystalline clarity. I have observed your activities in this galaxy for 3 years through the dimensional rift you left open. I've watched you challenge cosmic powers, build pantheons, and restructure hierarchies. And I've concluded that you're making mistakes that will undermine everything you've built. So I've come to correct them. Zeus felt divine pride, war with divine annoyance. Athena, you weren't supposed to follow me here. Olympus needs you. Olympus functions adequately without me. Athena replied, descending to land on the temple platform beside him. This galaxy, however, is on the verge of theological catastrophe. Sith gods, Force champions, demigods with rebellion in their hearts, and you, at the center, making political compromises that weaken your divine authority. You need strategic wisdom, Father. Fortunately, I've brought it. Talia emerged from the temple, immediately recognizing the newcomer's significance. Another Olympian. This complicates everything. Actually, Athena said, turning her strategic gaze on Talia. Father has been attempting to govern divine territories with mortal-level political structures, councils, representatives, negotiated compromises. That's inefficient and contrary to divine nature. Gods should rule through wisdom and strength, not democracy and debate. The council is working, Zeus countered, defensive despite himself. Demigods are engaged. Territories function smoothly, and you've created 5,000 potential challengers to your authority. By granting them autonomy, Athena interrupted. Astrid already attempted rebellion. Others will follow. Father, you've always been too generous with power distribution. Olympus tolerated it because we were family. But these demigods aren't family. They're created servants who should recognize their place. Zeus felt the old argument resurface, the fundamental disagreement that had caused friction on Olympus for eons. Athena believed divine hierarchy should be absolute, with wisdom, her guiding power, his imperfect strategic harmony. He believed hierarchy required flexibility, adaptation, and occasional compromise to remain stable. Daughter, this galaxy operates under different rules than Olympus, Zeus said carefully. The Force challenges divine authority in ways Kronos and the Titans never could. Cosmic balance here is literal, physical law, not just philosophical principle. I've adapted because rigid hierarchy would have been crushed by external pressure. Then we'll demonstrate that divine wisdom can overcome cosmic balance, Athena replied. I've spent 3 years studying the Force from Olympus, understanding its nature and limitations. I know how to defeat Aquitas, how to eliminate Sith gods, how to consolidate your pantheon into truly effective hierarchy. All you need to do is step aside and let me implement strategic corrections. Zeus stared at his daughter, recognizing the essential problem. She was right about many specifics, but wrong about fundamental approach. Yes, his compromises had created vulnerabilities. Yes, the council was inefficient compared to direct divine decree. But those inefficiencies were features, not bugs. They prevented the rigid tyranny that would inevitably trigger rebellion. Athena, Zeus said gently, I appreciate your concern and your wisdom, but I won't step aside. These are my territories, built through my power and maintained through my choices. You're welcome to stay, to advise, to help govern, but you don't command here. Athena's eyes flashed with divine irritation. Then I'll prove my approach superior through demonstration. Give me one system to govern according to divine wisdom without democratic compromise. Let's see which model produces better results. Your counsels and compromises, or my strategic absolutism. Zeus considered carefully. Refusing would insult his daughter and waste her considerable capabilities. Accepting would create internal competition within the divine territories that could undermine unity. But it would also provide valuable data about which governance model truly worked best. Ryloth, Zeus decided. The system petitioned to join 2 weeks ago, but hasn't been fully integrated. You may govern it according to your methods for 6 months. We'll compare your results against council-governed systems and determine which approach serves divine authority better. Agreed, Athena said immediately. And when I prove strategic wisdom superior to political compromise, you'll restructure the entire pantheon accordingly. She departed for Ryloth that same day, leaving Zeus and Talia to contemplate the new complexity Athena's arrival created. Another Olympian god, Talia said quietly, with different philosophy about divine governance. This won't remain contained to one system. No, Zeus agreed. Athena has never done anything small-scale. She'll prove her point, or she'll create problems that force me to intervene. Either way, the divine territories just became significantly more complicated. Across the galaxy, Aequitas felt the new divine presence and calculated implications. 2 Olympian gods now operated in Force-dominated space, with potentially more to follow. The Force champion reached deeper into cosmic balance, preparing for the possibility that the Cold War between divinity and cosmic power was about to escalate dramatically. And on Korriban, Kreia smiled as sensors detected Athena's arrival. More Olympian gods meant more opportunities for theft, study, and eventual ascension to true divinity rather than stolen semi-godhood. The theological arms race had begun in earnest. Athena's governance of Ryloth proved immediately and dramatically effective in ways that disturbed every being who observed it. The Twi'lek population, historically exploited by slavers and criminal syndicates, found themselves under protection so absolute it bordered on suffocating. Athena didn't merely drive out criminals, she anticipated criminal activity before it occurred. Her divine wisdom allowing her to perceive patterns invisible to mortal perception. She restructured Ryloth's economy with strategic precision that eliminated poverty within days. She reformed infrastructure through divine will, guided by perfect understanding of engineering, logistics, and resource distribution. Within 3 weeks, Ryloth was objectively the most prosperous, safest, and efficiently governed system in the entire divine territories. It was also the least free. She's created a surveillance state run by divine omniscience, Talia observed, reviewing reports from Jedi observers stationed on Ryloth. Every citizen's life is optimized for maximum societal benefit. Crime doesn't exist because Athena prevents it before it occurs. Poverty doesn't exist because she allocates resources with perfect efficiency. But individual choice is effectively eliminated. Twi'leks are prosperous, healthy, and safe, and they have zero autonomy. Zeus studied the reports with growing concern. The population isn't complaining. Satisfaction surveys show 97% approval. Because Athena has solved every material problem they face, Talia countered. but she's done it by treating them as pieces on a strategic board rather than beings with agency. They don't govern themselves, they're governed by wisdom. They can't question or influence. It's perfect tyranny, and they love it because the results are undeniable. The first Demigod Council session after Athena's arrival focused entirely on the Ryloth situation. Representatives were split. Some admired Athena's efficiency and argued for adopting her methods galaxy-wide, while others recognized the dangerous precedent of divine micromanagement that eliminated mortal choice entirely. She's proving that gods can govern better than councils or representatives, Demigod Thane argued. Ryloth functions perfectly under her wisdom. Why should we settle for less efficient governance, just to preserve illusion of mortal participation? Because mortal participation isn't illusion, Astrid countered forcefully. It's the difference between governance and ownership. Athena doesn't govern Ryloth. She owns it, directs it, controls every aspect of existence there. That's not divine authority serving populations. It's populations serving divine convenience. Zeus let the debate continue, recognizing that his demigods were articulating the fundamental tension he felt about Athena's approach. She was right, that divine wisdom produced superior outcomes by every measurable metric. But she was wrong about the cost. Beings reduced to perfectly managed components lost something essential, even if they couldn't articulate what. The crisis came in week 4, when a group of young Twi'leks attempted to leave Ryloth. Not because they were unhappy, they explicitly stated satisfaction with Athena's governance. They simply wanted to experience self-determination, make choices without divine oversight, live lives that weren't perfectly optimized for collective benefit. Athena denied their departure. Your desire to leave serves no strategic purpose. She informed them through direct divine communication. Ryloth requires your skills in positions I've assigned you. Your departure would create inefficiencies that would marginally reduce collective prosperity. Therefore, you will remain. The Twi'leks protested, arguing they had right to freedom of movement. Athena responded with pure logic. They had voluntarily chosen to live under divine governance when Ryloth petitioned to join Zeus's territories. That governance included accepting wisdom-based resource allocation, which sometimes meant remaining where strategic necessity demanded. Their individual preferences, while noted, were subordinate to collective optimization. When the Twi'leks attempted to depart anyway, Athena didn't harm them. She simply prevented their ships from leaving through divine intervention. They remained on Ryloth, prosperous and safe, but prisoners of perfect governance. The incident reached Zeus within hours, and he immediately transported to Ryloth to confront his daughter. He found her in the governmental palace she'd manifested, reviewing holographic displays that tracked every citizen's location, activity, and psychological state in real time. Athena, you've imprisoned citizens for wanting to leave, Zeus said without preamble. That's not governance, that's slavery. I've optimized resource allocation, Athena corrected calmly. Those individuals possess skills currently needed here. Allowing them to depart would create vacancies that would take months to fill through training replacements. Their individual desires, while understandable, are strategically insignificant compared to collective welfare. They're not resources to be allocated, Zeus argued. They're beings with right to self-determination. Even under divine governance, mortals retain agency. Why? Athena challenged, turning to face him directly. What purpose does agency serve when divine wisdom can make better choices? You've always had this blind spot. Father, you grant mortals freedom they can't use effectively, then act surprised when they make suboptimal decisions. I've eliminated that problem on Ryloth. Citizens live better lives than they could ever achieve through their own choices. That they occasionally want to make worse choices doesn't obligate me to permit it. End quote. I've eliminated by their sedically bidded, end quote. I've eliminated by their sedically. Zeus recognized the argument's logic while rejecting its conclusion. They'll resent perfect governance, no matter how beneficial. Then I'll address that resentment when it occurs, Athena replied. Until then, I'm demonstrating that divine wisdom produces objectively superior outcomes to your democratic compromises. Ryloth functions perfectly. Can you say the same about systems governed by councils and representatives? Zeus couldn't, not honestly. Council-governed systems dealt with crime, inefficiency, and occasional policy failures, but they also developed organically, adapted to local conditions through trial and error, and created populations invested in their own governance rather than passive recipients of divine management. Release the Twi'leks who want to leave, Zeus commanded, using divine authority he'd rarely invoked with Athena. Immediately, Athena's eyes flashed with divine irritation. You're undermining efficient governance to preserve principle that serves no practical purpose. This is why Olympus stagnated. You value tradition over strategy. I value beings over outcomes, Zeus corrected. And that's not negotiable. Release them, or I revoke your authority over Ryloth entirely. For a moment, divine wills clashed, father and daughter, king and strategist, each embodying different aspects of godhood. Finally, Athena nodded coldly. Released. But I want recorded that I'm complying under protest. You're allowing suboptimal governance because you can't accept that divine wisdom requires accepting uncomfortable truths about mortal limitations. The Twi'leks departed Ryloth that same day, and their departure created exactly the inefficiencies Athena had predicted. Ryloth's optimization decreased marginally, but it remained prosperous, safe, and well-governed, just slightly less perfectly than before. Zeus returned to Onderon, troubled by what he'd witnessed. Athena had proven her model worked, at least by measurable metrics, but she'd also revealed its ultimate cost. Beings transformed from participants in their own existence into components of divine machinery, however beneficent. This is the fundamental choice divine governance forces, Talia said after Zeus explained the confrontation. Perfect outcomes through absolute control, or imperfect outcomes through preserved agency. There's no middle ground. Trying to balance both produces neither perfect optimization nor genuine freedom. Then we accept imperfection, Zeus decided. Because perfection achieved through eliminating choice isn't governance, it's benevolent imprisonment. I came to this galaxy to prove divine authority superior to cosmic balance. I won't prove it by turning populations into managed resources. But across the divine territories, demigods debated the Ryloth example. Some sided with Zeus's emphasis on agency. Others found Athena's results compelling enough to override philosophical concerns. The pantheon was fracturing not along rebellion lines, but philosophical ones. Those who believed gods should govern wisely versus those who believed gods should enable self-governance. And Athena, watching from Ryloth, calculated her next move. She had demonstrated superior efficiency. Now she needed to prove that efficiency ultimately mattered more than principle. The philosophical war within the divine territories had begun, and unlike conflicts fought through power, this battle would be decided through demonstrated outcomes over time. On Korriban, Darth Traya completed the transformation of her fifth Sith Lord into semi-divine status through stolen essence. The Sith pantheon was growing, each new god proving the technique's reliability. But Kriya watched Athena's arrival, and the philosophical division it created with calculating interest. Two Olympian gods arguing about governance philosophy, she mused to Darth Sion. Zeus compromising, Athena demanding absolute control, and their demigods fracturing along ideological lines. She smiled coldly. Perfect. Let them fight among themselves about how to rule. While they're distracted, we'll build power base they won't notice until we're strong enough to challenge them directly. The galaxy now contained multiple competing divine factions: Zeus's council-based hierarchy, Athena's strategic absolutism, Krea's Sith pantheon, and Aiquitas watching everything with cosmic balance's absolute authority. Four visions of how divine power should function. The age of theological plurality had arrived in full, and no one, not gods, not force champions, not mortals caught between, knew which vision would ultimately prevail. The dimensional rift above Onderon had remained open since Athena's arrival, a wound in reality that Zeus had deliberately maintained to monitor Olympus and prevent unexpected arrivals. But monitoring worked both directions. Olympus could observe the Star Wars galaxy just as easily. And what the other gods saw troubled them enough that 3 more Olympians decided intervention was necessary. They arrived together in a display of divine coordination that made Athena's entrance seem subtle by comparison. Apollo, god of light and music, materialized in radiant glory that made Onderon's twin suns seem dim. Ares, god of war, descended with divine fury that rattled the planet's tectonic plates. And Artemis, goddess of the hunt, appeared with her silver bow drawn, already scanning for threats with predators' awareness. Zeus felt their arrival and immediately transported to the dimensional rift's location. Apollo, Ares, Artemis, what are you doing here? Saving you from yourself. Ares replied bluntly, his divine presence radiating barely controlled aggression. We've watched you compromise with mortals, negotiate with cosmic forces, and allow challenges to your authority that would have gotten beings cast into Tartarus on Olympus. You've gone soft, Father. Time for a reminder of what godhood actually means. I came to provide cultural wisdom, Apollo added more diplomatically, his golden radiance softening the confrontation's edge. This galaxy has music, art, and civilization, but it's been corrupted by war and darkness for millennia. I can elevate them, unfolding war, bring true enlightenment that makes your divine governance not just effective, but genuinely inspiring. And I came to hunt, Artemis said simply, her silver eyes tracking movement across Onderon's wilderness. This galaxy has beasts and monsters worth testing myself against. The Sith you've mentioned, these Darksiders who corrupt power, they sound like worthy prey. Zeus felt the situation spiraling beyond his control. One additional Olympian had created philosophical friction. 4 meant potential divine civil war if their different approaches clashed. You weren't supposed to follow me, any of you. Olympus is boring, Ares said flatly. Centuries of peace, no real conflicts, just endless festivals and political maneuvering. You opened portal to galaxy at war. Constant conflict. Genuine threats. Actual purpose for war god. I'm staying, and I'm establishing divine domain, where warfare is properly appreciated, rather than philosophically debated. I'm not allowing you to turn systems into war zones, Zeus countered. Then stop me, Ares challenged, divine battle lust radiating from his form. You're king of Olympus, Father. Prove you're still king here, because from what I've observed, you've become king who negotiates, compromises, and tolerates challenges. That's not the Zeus who overthrew Kronos. The confrontation escalated instantly, divine power clashing as father and son tested each other's resolve. Lightning met war fury in collision that forced Onderon's population to seek shelter. Talia intervened physically, her own divine presence placing herself between Zeus and Ares. Stop, she commanded with authority that surprised even herself. You're going to destroy Onderon testing dominance. Whatever conflicts exist between you, resolve them without annihilating populations caught in the middle. Ares looked at her with mixture of respect and contempt. A demigod lectures gods? Father, you really have lowered standards. She's right, Apollo interjected, his diplomatic nature recognizing the danger. Ares, you wanted purpose in this galaxy. Fighting Father isn't purpose, it's patricide. There are actual enemies here. Sith who've stolen divine essence, Force champions who oppose godhood, conflicts worth your attention, direct aggression toward them instead of family. Artemis nodded agreement. The hunt requires patience. We don't need to fight each other when this galaxy offers so many other targets. Ares considered his battle lust, not diminishing but redirecting. Fine, but I'm claiming Mandalore, warrior culture, combat traditions, beings who actually appreciate warfare, They'll make proper worshippers. You can keep your committee-governed systems, Father. I'll show you what divine authority looks like when wielded without apology. Zeus wanted to refuse, but he recognized political reality. He couldn't stop Ares without full-scale divine battle that would devastate multiple systems. Better to contain his son's aggression in one location than have it rampage across the territories unchecked. Mandalore isn't part of the divine territories, Zeus said carefully. It's independent warrior culture that's maintained neutrality for generations. If they accept your authority voluntarily, I won't interfere. But if you try to conquer them through force, you'll face me directly. Mandalorians worship strength, Ares replied confidently. I'm offering them divine strength embodied. They'll accept me gladly. He departed for Mandalore immediately, leaving Zeus to deal with Apollo and Artemis. The god of light approached the temple with artistic appreciation, already envisioning how he would reshape architecture to reflect divine aesthetics. Artemis wandered toward Onderon's wilderness, her hunting instincts drawn to the planet's dangerous fauna. This is chaos, Talia said quietly to Zeus. 4 additional Olympians, each with different philosophy about how gods should operate. Your pantheon of 5,000 demigods is about to be overshadowed by 5 actual gods who don't answer to your council system. I know, Zeus admitted, but I can't send them back without fighting them, which would prove Ares' point about my authority weakening. I have to manage them, contain them, and somehow integrate 5 gods who never learn to compromise into a governance structure built on negotiation. The Demigod Council convened emergency session, with all 12 representatives demanding clarification about how Olympian gods fit into established hierarchy. Zeus found himself in the uncomfortable position of explaining that his children, beings of equal divine status to himself in many respects, didn't technically answer to council authority any more than he did. So the council advises demigods and you, Astrid summarized coldly, but has no authority over Athena, Apollo, Ares, or Artemis? They're simply independent divine powers operating within your territories? That's the situation. Yes, Zeus confirmed. Then the council is meaningless, Kyle said bluntly. We've spent months establishing representative governance, creating systems where demigods have voice in divine law. But if Olympian gods can ignore those laws, operate independently, and reshape systems according to their individual philosophies, we're not governing. We're pretending to govern, while actual power remains concentrated in beings who don't recognize any authority except familial hierarchy. The criticism stung because it was accurate. Zeus had created governance, structure, designed to give demigods meaningful participation. But the arrival of other Olympians exposed that structure's fundamental weakness. It only worked if all divine beings accepted it voluntarily. Olympian gods, accustomed to operating as independent sovereigns, felt no obligation to participate in councils or seek consensus. I'll speak with them, Zeus promised. Establish ground rules about how Olympian gods operate within the territories. They won't have absolute freedom, but they'll have more autonomy than demigods. That's unavoidable given their nature and power level. In other words, hierarchy based on birth, Astrid observed. Olympian gods at the top, you as king, demigods in the middle, mortals at the bottom. Everything we've built toward egalitarian divine governance just collapsed under family privilege. Zeus had no immediate response because Astrid was right. The arrival of other Olympians had reintroduced exactly the rigid hierarchy he'd been slowly reforming. And worse, it exposed contradiction at the heart of his governance philosophy. He wanted demigods to participate meaningfully while maintaining ultimate authority himself. That worked when he was the only supreme power. But with other Olympian gods present, each demanding their own authority, the whole structure became untenable. On Mandalore, Ares' arrival created immediate crisis. The Mandalorians, proud warrior culture that had never bowed to any external authority, found themselves faced with a god who embodied warfare itself. Ares didn't ask for worship, he demanded it through demonstration. He challenged their greatest warriors to single combat and defeated them effortlessly. He reshaped their weapons through divine will, making Mandalorian steel sharper, stronger, more lethal. He offered them something their culture valued above all else: the certainty that following him would make them invincible in battle. Within days, half of Mandalore's clans had sworn allegiance to Ares. The other half prepared for civil war, refusing to worship any being, even a god. The warrior culture was fracturing along theological lines, and Ares encouraged it, believing that conflict would ultimately produce stronger, more worthy followers. Zeus received reports of Mandalore's situation with growing alarm. He's deliberately creating civil war to determine which Mandalorians are worthy of his divine favor. This is Ares at his worst, treating mortals as entertainment and proving grounds for his ego. Can you stop him? Talia asked. Militarily, yes. Politically, no, Zeus replied grimly. If I intervene forcefully, I prove I'm willing to fight my own family to maintain control. That encourages other challenges. If I don't intervene, I accept Mandalore tearing itself apart while under nominal divine protection. Either way, I lose. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the following week. Athena, seeing Ares' success in attracting worshippers through pure demonstration of power, adjusted her approach on Ryloth to be more overtly controlling. Apollo began reshaping systems' aesthetics without consulting local populations, imposing his vision of divine beauty whether mortals wanted it or not. Artemis hunted dangerous creatures to extinction on 3 worlds, disrupting ecosystems Zeus's demigods had carefully maintained. The divine territories were fracturing under the weight of too many divine visions. Each Olympian god, certain their approach was correct, none willing to subordinate themselves to collective governance. And across the galaxy, Equitas watched with cosmic calculation. The arrival of multiple Olympian gods had shifted the balance dramatically. The Force Champion reached out through its connection to the living force, seeking guidance about whether this constituted treaty violation. The answer came back uncertain. The treaty restricted Zeus specifically, but hadn't anticipated multiple Olympian gods operating independently. Darth Treya observed the chaos with predatory satisfaction. The Olympians are destroying Zeus's carefully constructed political balance more effectively than any Sith attack could. Let them fight among themselves. Let populations become disillusioned with divine authority that can't even coordinate internally. When the divine territories collapse under their own contradictions, we'll be ready to offer an alternative. Sith divinity, unified through strength rather than fractured through family politics. Zeus stood in his temple, surrounded by reports of increasing disorder, and realized he faced a choice that would define his legacy in this galaxy. Reassert absolute authority through force, crushing dissent and opposition even from his own children, or accept that divine governance was inherently unstable when multiple gods with competing visions tried to rule the same space. The God King who had challenged the Force itself now found his greatest challenge came from within his own pantheon. The crisis reached breaking point when Mandalore's civil war escalated beyond containment and Ares, rather than mediating, actively armed both sides to prolong the conflict. Zeus arrived on Mandalore to find the warrior world burning not metaphorically, but literally. As divine-enhanced weapons caused destruction the planet's infrastructure couldn't withstand. Thousands of Mandalorians lay dead, with thousands more preparing for final battle that would determine which faction earned Ares' permanent favor. Zeus materialized in the middle of the battlefield, his divine presence forcing both armies to halt mid-charge. Ares stood on a mountain overlooking the carnage, wearing armor forged from divine bronze and carrying a spear that dripped with Mandalorian blood. When he saw his father, the god of war smiled. Finally, I was wondering when you'd arrive to lecture me about proportionate response and political sensitivity. Tell me I'm being excessive. Ares gestured at the battlefield below. These warriors are proving themselves through combat. The weak fall. The strong survive. The weak fall. And the survivors will worship me with genuine devotion earned through trial. That's how gods should be worshipped. Not through negotiation and committee meetings, but through demonstrated supremacy. You're murdering beings who worship you to determine which survivors get the privilege of continuing to worship you, Zeus said, his voice carrying divine fury barely contained. "That's not building devotion, that's genocide with religious justification. It's selection," Ares corrected. "Only the strongest deserve divine favor. The rest are casualties of evolution. You used to understand this, Father, before you started compromising with mortals and pretending their opinions mattered. Remember overthrowing Kronos? Remember casting Titans into Tartarus? You didn't negotiate with them, you destroyed them and established new order. I'm doing the same here." Zeus looked at the Mandalorian armies, warriors who had been fighting honorably until a god arrived and turned their cultural conflicts into apocalyptic war. He saw the bodies scattered across the battlefield, beings who had worshipped Ares and died for the privilege, and he made a decision that would reshape the entire divine territories. "Ares, you have violated fundamental principles of divine governance I've established. You've turned worship into bloodsport, treated believers as expendable, and created destruction that serves no purpose except satisfying your need for violence. I'm revoking your authority to operate independently within the divine territories." Ares laughed, genuine and mocking. "You're revoking my authority? Father, I'm a god equal to you in status, if not in power. You don't command me. You can request, suggest, even threaten, but you don't revoke anything. Unless..." His eyes gleamed with battle lust. "You're prepared to enforce that revocation through combat. Are you, Father, are you ready to fight your own son to prove you still have authority over your family?" The challenge hung in the air, and every being present, Mandalorian warriors, demigods observing remotely, even Aquitas watching from orbit, understood the stakes. If Zeus backed down, his authority over the other Olympians evaporated completely. If he fought, he risked civil war among gods that would devastate the territories he'd spent 3 years building. "I am," Zeus said quietly, and lightning erupted from his form with intensity that made his previous displays seem restrained. "You want to know if I'm still the god who overthrew Kronos? Let me remind you. The battle between father and son shook Mandalore's foundations. Zeus wielded lightning with surgical precision, each bolt targeting Ares specifically, while avoiding the Mandalorians below. Ares fought with pure combat fury, his spear striking with force that cracked mountains, and his war cry causing warriors' hearts to temporarily stop from sheer divine pressure. They fought for 17 minutes of mortal time hours by divine perception, and every Olympian god in the galaxy felt it. Athena on Ryloth paused her perfect governance, recognizing that the outcome would determine whether Zeus retained authority over the family. Apollo stopped his aesthetic restructuring to watch through divine senses. Artemis returned from her hunt, silver bow ready in case intervention became necessary. Zeus won through combination of superior power and strategic patience qualities. Ares possessed individually but never combined. The god of war fought brilliantly, but predictably. His attacks following patterns Zeus had witnessed for eons. Zeus countered each assault, absorbed each strike, and gradually wore down his son's divine stamina until Ares knelt in exhaustion, spear fallen from his grasp. "Yield," Zeus commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Never," Ares gasped. But his defiance was pride speaking, not genuine capacity to continue. His divine essence was depleted to the point where further combat would risk permanent damage, not death, which gods couldn't suffer in traditional sense, but dissolution of consciousness into raw divine energy, a fate worse than mortality. "Then I'll make this simple," Zeus said, his divine presence expanding to encompass all of Mandalore. He addressed not just Ares, but every Olympian god operating in the galaxy. "I am Zeus, king of Olympus, ruler of these divine territories. I challenged the force itself and fought it to stalemate. I've built pantheon of 5,000 demigods and maintained order across 42 star systems. You are my children, powerful and worthy of respect. But you are not my equals in authority. Not here, not in this galaxy I claimed through my own power." He looked directly at Ares. "You may remain in the divine territories if you accept 3 conditions. First, You participate in the Demigod Council's deliberations when your actions affect populations under divine protection. Second, you subordinate your individual authority to collective divine law we establish together. You accept that worshippers are beings deserving protection, not resources for your entertainment. Refuse any condition, and I will use the dimensional rift to send you back to Olympus forcibly. Ares stared at his father, divine pride warring with practical recognition that Zeus had proven superior. And if I accept these conditions, I retain some autonomy? I'm not reduced to demigod status? You're Olympian god with Olympian power, Zeus confirmed. But you operate within structure, designed to prevent exactly what you created here. Divine authority run amok, causing destruction that serves ego rather than genuine governance. Accept the conditions, or return to Olympus, where you can wage war without my interference. Ares picked up his spear slowly, divine essence gradually regenerating. I accept, but only because you've proven you're still the god I remember, willing to fight when necessary, not just negotiate endlessly. That's the father I'll follow. The committee version? That one I'd have challenged until you killed me or I killed you. Zeus helped Ares to his feet, and together they addressed the Mandalorian armies below. The civil war ends now, Zeus declared. All factions will be heard, grievances addressed through negotiation rather than combat. Ares will remain as divine patron of Mandalorian warrior culture. But he will not encourage conflicts that serve only divine entertainment. This is not negotiable. This is divine decree, backed by power you've just witnessed. The Mandalorians, sobered by the battle they'd witnessed, laid down weapons and began the painful work of reconciliation. Zeus and Ares departed together. Their relationship fundamentally changed, no longer king and independent god, but king and subordinate god who had accepted hierarchy's necessity. Zeus dalji all Olympian gods to Onderon that same day, and Ares stood beside Zeus, his presence a living testament to what happened when family challenged the king's authority unsuccessfully. New rules, Zeus announced without preamble. All Olympian gods operating in the divine territories answer to me, not as suggestions, but as absolute commands. You retain significant autonomy within your domains, but you participate in collective governance through expanded council that includes both demigods and Olympian gods. Your power is acknowledged, but so is your responsibility to populations under divine protection. And if we refuse? Athena asked, her strategic mind already calculating options. Then you return to Olympus, or you challenge me as Ares did, Zeus replied. I'm offering you meaningful roles in something unprecedented divine governance that actually works, that serves populations rather than simply ruling them. But I won't tolerate independent operations that undermine what we're building. Unity or departure. Those are your options. Athena considered carefully, her wisdom recognizing that Zeus had fundamentally changed since arriving in this galaxy. The God King who left Olympus would never have offered subordinate gods any voice in governance. This Zeus had learned adaptation, compromise, and the strategic value of distributed authority. Fighting him would be difficult. Working with him might actually produce something worthwhile. I accept, Athena said, but I want formal authority over strategic planning for the territories. My wisdom, your power, demigods' local knowledge combined through structured collaboration rather than competing independently. Agreed, Zeus confirmed. Apollo? I accept, the god of light said. But I want authority over cultural development, arts, music, education. Populations need more than efficient governance and military protection. They need enlightenment. Granted. Artemis? I accept, the goddess of the hunt replied. But I want protection of natural ecosystems included in divine law. Some hunts are worth preserving, not winning. Some beasts shouldn't be driven extinct just because gods can kill them. Agreed, Zeus said, feeling the structure solidifying. Then we have formal hierarchy. I rule as king. You four govern as Olympian council with specific portfolios. Demigods govern local systems with significant autonomy, and all of us answer to collective divine law we establish together. Not perfect democracy, I retain final authority, but genuine collaboration. The 5 Olympian gods stood together, and for the first time since their arrival, they looked like unified pantheon rather than competing individuals. The divine territories had survived its internal crisis, but only by fundamentally restructuring how divine authority operated. Across the galaxy, beings reacted to the resolution. Republic senators watched nervously, recognizing that unified divine hierarchy was more formidable than competing gods. Jedi masters meditated on implications of gods learning to cooperate rather than conflict. Sith lords like Kreia calculated whether unified Olympian pantheon could be exploited, or whether it required new strategies entirely. And Aquitas, watching from its orbital station above Tython, reached deeper into the Force for guidance. The Cosmic Champion had been created to oppose Zeus specifically, but Zeus had evolved, adapted, built something that wasn't simple tyranny. The Force Champion faced question its creators hadn't anticipated. What happens when divine authority becomes genuinely collaborative? When gods learn to govern responsibly? The Force offered no immediate answer, which itself was answer. Cosmic balance didn't oppose governance, it opposed imbalance. If divine hierarchy could maintain genuine equilibrium, serve populations effectively, and prevent the chaos that disrupted cosmic order, then perhaps gods and Force could coexist permanently rather than temporarily. The Cold War might be ending, or it might simply be entering new phase, with both sides recognizing that absolute victory was impossible, and coexistence required constant negotiation. Zeus returned to his temple and collapsed onto his throne, divine exhaustion finally catching up to him. Talia sat beside him, her own divine presence radiating sympathy. "You won," she observed. "I survived," Zeus corrected. "But I also changed. The god who arrived here 3 years ago would have simply destroyed Ares and ruled through fear. I've learned not necessarily softness, but strategic flexibility. The willingness to restructure rather than simply dominate. Is that weakness or wisdom? Both? Probably," Zeus admitted. "But it's what works in this galaxy. The Force demands balance. Divine authority demands hierarchy. Somehow, we've found a way to provide both. How long that lasts?" He shrugged. "Ask me in another 3 years." The restructured divine hierarchy began functioning immediately, and the results surprised even Zeus. Olympian gods brought capabilities demigods couldn't match. Athena's strategic planning prevented conflicts before they started. Apollo's cultural programs elevated populations beyond mere survival. Artemis's ecological protections maintained balance in ways divine power alone couldn't achieve. And even Ares' warrior patronage, properly contained, gave martial cultures like the Mandalorians genuine purpose without destructive excess. The divine territories weren't perfect. They struggled with balancing divine efficiency against mortal agency, dealt with populations that resented any authority regardless of its benefits, and faced constant external pressure from Republic, Sith, and Force champion observers. But they functioned in ways that genuinely improved billions of lives while maintaining the divine hierarchy that Zeus insisted was necessary for cosmic order. The galaxy had learned to live with gods, and gods had learned to live with limitations. 6 months after the Mandalore crisis, the restructured divine territories faced their ultimate test when Darth Kreia completed her Sith pantheon. 12 Sith lords had undergone her divine transformation ritual, each possessing semi-divine status, stolen and adapted from various sources, not just Zeus's demigods, but from Force Virgences, ancient Sith artifacts, and forbidden techniques that predated the Republic itself. They called themselves the Umbral Pantheon, gods of darkness who rejected both Zeus's hierarchy and the Force's balance in favor of pure individual supremacy. Kreia led them to Ziost, the ancient Sith world where Zeus had once faced the original Sith coalition. There, in the ruins where divine power and Sith alchemy had first clashed, she She declared the Umbral Pantheon's independence from all existing cosmic orders. We are gods born from theft, elevated through will, sustained by dark passion rather than worship or cosmic energy, Kriya announced, her voice carrying through the force to every sensitive being in the galaxy. Zeus offers hierarchy. The force offers balance. We offer freedom, divine power, without subordination, godhood without obligation, supremacy limited only by individual strength. Let those who seek true power come to us. Let those who tire of serving come to us. We will show the galaxy what gods can accomplish when freed from all constraints. The declaration was calculated provocation, designed to force response from both Zeus and Aquitas. Kriya knew that unregulated divine power claiming independence from all cosmic orders would be intolerable to both the Olympian pantheon and the Force champion. She was deliberately creating crisis that would force her enemies to reveal their true capabilities and limitations. Zeus received the declaration in council session with his Olympian family and senior demigods. The immediate response was unanimous. The Umbral Pantheon had to be stopped before they established independent power base that would undermine everything the divine territories represented. They're offering divinity without responsibility, Athena observed with clinical precision. That's appealing to exactly the beings most dangerous when wielding power, those who want supremacy without accepting governance obligations. If we don't act decisively, they'll attract followers who will use divine power for purely destructive purposes. But they're operating in Sith space, Talia pointed out, outside our jurisdiction under the treaty. If we attack them, we violate the same territorial boundaries we insisted Aquitas respect. Then we request Aquitas's cooperation, Zeus decided. The Force champion was created to eliminate divine power that disrupts cosmic balance. The Umbral Pantheon fits that definition perfectly. Stolen divinity, operating without any principle except individual supremacy. This is exactly the situation where our interests align. He reached out through channels established with the Force champion, proposing coordinated action against the Umbral Pantheon. Aquitas's response came swiftly. The Umbral Pantheon represents divine power corrupted beyond any redemption. They must be eliminated. But understand, Zeus' cooperation against this threat doesn't resolve fundamental tension between divine hierarchy and cosmic balance. We ally temporarily against common enemy. Agreed, Zeus replied. But today, we fight together. The assault on Zeus was coordinated with precision that surprised beings observing from across the galaxy. Zeus led the Olympian gods personally, with Athena commanding tactical deployment, Ares providing combat leadership, Apollo and Artemis supporting from distance with divine radiance and precisely placed arrows. 500 demigods accompanied them, representing the full might of the divine territory's military capacity. Aquitas arrived simultaneously from the opposite vector, bringing not physical troops but concentrated force energy that made Zeus' atmosphere crackle with cosmic power. The Force champion had gathered strength from billions of Force-sensitive beings across the galaxy, all contributing small amounts of their connection to create overwhelming collective power. The Umbral Pantheon met them in the Valley of the Dark Lords, 12 Sith gods arrayed in formation that spoke of careful planning and strategic coordination. Kriya stood at their center, her stolen divine essence, now fully integrated and amplified through months of dark side meditation. Zeus, Aquitas, the tyrant and the enforcer, together at last, Kriya said with cold amusement. How quickly enemies become allies when facing those who reject all authority, but you're both making the same mistake. You believe 12 gods can't stand against your combined might. You're wrong. The battle that followed would be remembered as the Clash of Pantheons, where three competing visions of divine power collided with force that reshaped Zeus' landscape permanently. Zeus and the Olympians wielded divine authority, refined through eons of experience, each god operating with perfect coordination, born from familial bonds and shared history. Aquitas channeled cosmic balance itself, the force's pure energy given directed purpose, and the Umbral Pantheon fought with desperate innovation, using stolen divine essence in ways Zeus had never conceived because they weren't bound by traditional godhood's rules. Kriya herself engaged Zeus directly, her semi-divine power amplified by Sith alchemy and dark side mastery. She couldn't match his raw strength, but she didn't need to. She used that understanding ruthlessly, forcing Zeus to hold back while she struck with techniques that blended divine power and force manipulation in unprecedented ways. "You're fighting your own nature," Kriya taunted during the battle's fury. "You want to destroy me, but you're restraining yourself because unleashing full divine power would devastate Zeus and kill thousands of Sith who aren't even involved in this conflict. That mercy is your weakness, Zeus. We Sith gods have no such limitations. We don't care about collateral damage or innocent casualties. We care only about victory." She proved her point by directing massive dark side energy toward a Sith settlement kilometers away, forcing Zeus to divert power to protect civilians rather than pressing his attack. It was tactically brilliant and morally reprehensible, exactly the kind of ruthless efficiency Sith philosophy produced when combined with divine power. But Kriya had miscalculated one crucial factor. Aequitas had no mercy, no hesitation, no concern for individual casualties when cosmic balance was at stake. The Force champion struck at the Umbral Pantheon with absolute ruthlessness, targeting their stolen divine essence at its source. Where Zeus fought to defeat, Aequitas fought to eliminate, unmaking divine power rather than simply overcoming it. 3 Sith gods fell in the first 10 minutes, their stolen essence forcibly returned to cosmic balance by Aequitas' relentless assault. 4 more fell within the hour, unable to counter Force techniques specifically designed to unravel improperly acquired divinity. The Umbral Pantheon, so confident in their power and independence, discovered they had built their godhood on foundations that cosmic balance could simply dissolve. Kriya recognized defeat approaching and made the choice that defined Sith philosophy: survival over principle, adaptation over stubborn resistance, retreat. She commanded the remaining 5 Sith gods. "We can't win this battle. We regroup, adapt, and try again when circumstances favor us." The Umbral Pantheon scattered, each Sith god fleeing in different directions to prevent coordinated pursuit. Aequitas destroyed 2 more during the retreat, but Zeus deliberately allowed Kriya herself to escape, not from mercy, but from strategic calculation. A defeated enemy who fled could be tracked, studied, potentially turned into asset. A martyred enemy would inspire others to follow her path. The battle ended with Zeus scarred but standing, 5 Sith gods eliminated, and the Umbral Pantheon reduced to 7 survivors scattered across the galaxy. Zeus and Aequitas stood amid the ruins, divine power and cosmic force regarding each other with mutual respect and resumed wariness. "You let Kriya escape," Aequitas observed. "As did you," Zeus countered. "Because we both recognized that total elimination would make her a martyr, inspiring others to steal divine essence and continue her work. Better to let her survive diminished." A warning about what happens when gods challenge both divine hierarchy and cosmic balance simultaneously. "Pragmatic," Aequitas acknowledged. "Perhaps you've learned more about strategic governance than I credited. But understand this cooperation was exceptional, not precedent. When next we face each other, it will be as opponents protecting incompatible principles." "Understood," Zeus replied. "But today, we proved that divine authority and cosmic balance can work together when necessary. That's worth remembering when our inevitable conflicts resume." The 2 powers separated, each returning to their respective domains. Zeus gathered his Olympian family and demigods, assessing casualties and consolidating victory. Aequitas returned to its orbital observation post, reporting to the Force that the immediate divine threat had been contained but not eliminated. Across the galaxy, populations reacted to the battle's outcome with complex mixture of relief, fear, and philosophical uncertainty. Zeus had proven divine hierarchy could defeat corrupted divinity when properly organized. Aequitas had demonstrated that cosmic balance would ruthlessly eliminate divine power that operated without principle. And the surviving Sith gods had learned that individual supremacy, however appealing philosophically, couldn't stand against coordinated opposition from established cosmic orders. The divine territories entered a period of consolidation and reflection. Zeus implemented reforms based on lessons learned during the Umbral Pantheon crisis. Better screening for beings seeking divine transformation, clearer ethical guidelines for demigod governance, stronger mechanisms for detecting and preventing divine essence theft. The Olympian Council proved its worth by coordinating these reforms efficiently, demonstrating that collaborative divine governance could adapt and improve. The Republic Senate, watching the battle's outcome, made official decision to recognize the divine territories as permanent fixture of galactic politics rather than temporary aberration. Treaties were formalized, trade agreements established, diplomatic protocols created. Gods and democracy would coexist indefinitely, each serving populations according to different principles, but maintaining sufficient cooperation to prevent catastrophic conflict. The Jedi Order, deeply divided by 3 years of theological upheaval, began the slow process of incorporating divine existence into Force philosophy. Some masters argued that gods were simply extremely powerful Force users, while others recognized them as genuinely distinct phenomenon. The debate would continue for generations, but the Order survived by accepting that absolute answers weren't always available. Sometimes, cosmic mystery had to be acknowledged rather than solved. And on Korriban, Darth Kree meditated on her defeat and began planning anew. She had lost the first battle between Sith divinity and established cosmic orders, but Sith philosophy thrived on defeat, learning from failure and adapting. Next time, she would be stronger, wiser, and better prepared for the combined opposition of Zeus and Aquitas. Zeus stood in his temple on Onderon, surveying the territories he had built and defended through 3 years of constant challenge and adaptation. The galaxy had changed him. The God King who arrived seeking simple dominance had become something more complex. A ruler who understood that power required responsibility, that hierarchy needed flexibility, and that even gods had to learn from mortals. Talia joined him, her divine presence now fully recovered from Kriya's theft. "What are you thinking? That I challenge the Force seeking to prove divine authority superior," Zeus replied. "Instead, I've proven they're incompatible. Equals neither supreme, both necessary, forever in tension. It's not the victory I intended, but perhaps it's the one this galaxy needed." "And what comes next?" Zeus smiled, lightning dancing around his fingers as he contemplated futures stretching across millennia. "And when challenges inevitably arise, more Sith attempting divinity, Force champions questioning our right to exist, Olympians arriving with new philosophies, we face them together, as Pantheon, rather than competing individuals." He looked out across Onderon, seeing beyond its surface to the 42 systems that comprise the divine territories, the 5,000 demigods governing according to principles they had helped establish, the billions of mortals living under divine protection they had chosen voluntarily. "I came to this galaxy to challenge cosmic balance," Zeus said quietly. "I've ended up creating balance of different kind divine hierarchy that serves rather than simply rules. Gods who accept limitations rather than claiming absolute supremacy. Whether that legacy endures centuries or millennia remains to be seen. But for now, it's enough to know we've built something unprecedented. Olympus, reborn among stars that never knew gods, teaching both divinity and cosmic force that supremacy is less important than sustainable coexistence." The Force whispered across the galaxy, neither approving nor condemning, simply acknowledging. And in response, divine lightning wrote Zeus's declaration across Onderon's sky, a promise, a warning, and a statement of eternal truth. Gods and balance would coexist, neither supreme, neither subordinate, forever challenging each other to be better than either could achieve alone. The divine territories and the Force-dominated Republic settled into an equilibrium that would define the Old Republic's final centuries. Zeus's pantheon, now including 5 Olympian gods and 5,000 demigods, governed 42 systems with efficiency that made Republic bureaucracy seem medieval by comparison. But they governed with humility, learned through conflict, adaptation forced by challenges, and wisdom earned through acknowledging that divine power had limits even gods had to respect. The Demigod Council became the model other governments studied, a hybrid system combining divine wisdom with mortal perspectives, absolute authority with genuine representation. It wasn't perfect democracy, but it was governance that actually served its populations while maintaining stability through clear hierarchical structures. Systems continued petitioning to join, though at slower rates, as the Republic implemented reforms inspired by watching divine territories function. Aequitas remained in orbit above Tython, eternal guardian ensuring that divine power never again threatened cosmic balance catastrophically. The Force Champion and Zeus developed mutual respect, born from shared battles and philosophical debates conducted across years. They would never be allies in any traditional sense, but they became something perhaps more important: worthy adversaries who pushed each other toward excellence neither could achieve alone. The Jedi Order evolved to acknowledge multiple paths to understanding cosmic truth. Some Jedi studied with Zeus's demigods, learning how divine power and Force abilities could complement each other. Others maintained pure dedication to the Force, arguing that mixing divine and cosmic energies diluted both. The diversity strengthened the Order rather than fracturing it, proving that philosophical pluralism could coexist with institutional coherence. The Sith, paradoxically, struggled most with the new paradigm. Kriya's surviving disciples continued attempting to achieve divinity through theft and alchemy, but Zeus's reforms made divine essence theft increasingly difficult. The Sith pantheon became cautionary tale rather than inspiration, beings who gained power without foundation, ascending to godhood without understanding what divinity required beyond raw force. Most were eventually eliminated by Aequitas, Zeus, or their own internal conflicts. The galaxy learned profound lesson through Zeus's challenge. Cosmic orders, whether divine hierarchy or force balance, served populations best when they acknowledged limitations and competed through demonstrated outcomes, rather than absolute claims of supremacy. Gods who learned humility governed better than gods who claimed perfection. Cosmic forces that accepted divine existence as legitimate alternative maintained balance more effectively than forces that insisted on absolute monopoly. 3 years after the clash of pantheons, Zeus stood with Talia, watching Onderon's twin suns set, painting the sky in colors that reminded him of Olympus at twilight. 5,000 demigods across 42 systems continued their work, not ruling as distant tyrants, but governing as beings who understood both divine power and mortal limitations. The Olympian Council met regularly, family bonds transforming into institutional structures that would outlast even God's personal relationships. Was it worth it? Talia asked. Everything you've sacrificed. Absolute authority. Divine supremacy. The certainty that you were right about how gods should rule. Was proving hierarchy could coexist with balance worth becoming something different from the god who arrived here? Zeus considered the question with divine perspective that saw centuries as moments, but understood moments as eternally significant. I didn't just challenge the Force, I challenged myself. The god who arrived here believed power alone justified rule. The god I've become understands that power without wisdom, authority without responsibility, hierarchy without flexibility, leads only to inevitable rebellion and collapse. So yes, it was worth becoming different. Better, perhaps. Or at least more suited to galaxy that refuses to accept simple answers. The dimensional rift remained open above Onderon, a permanent bridge between Olympus and the Star Wars galaxy. Other gods occasionally visited, observed, and returned home with stories of Zeus's transformed kingdom. Some admired it and admired it. Others condemned it as weakness. But none could deny that it functioned, endured, and demonstrated that divine authority could evolve without surrendering its essential nature. The Force and divinity, cosmic balance and hierarchical power, impersonal energy and personal godhood all coexisted in eternal tension that generated neither peace nor war, but something more complex and ultimately more sustainable. Dynamic equilibrium, where competing principles forced each other toward excellence through constant challenge and mutual adaptation. Zeus had challenged the Force itself and learned that supremacy was illusion, that cosmic powers couldn't be ranked in simple hierarchies, that true wisdom lay in accepting complementary opposition rather than demanding absolute victory. The king of Olympus had become the king of divine territories, ruling not through fear or unquestionable authority, but through demonstrated competence, accepted responsibility, and willingness to learn from beings mortal and cosmic alike, who saw reality through perspectives no single god could encompass alone. The galaxy far, far away had been challenged by Zeus. In return, it had challenged him to become worthy of the power he wielded. Both had been transformed by the encounter, and both were better for it. May the Force be with you. More stories await.